Deadzone Rogue is a first-person shooter roguelite made by Prophecy Games, and look, before we get into the video, I want to bring something up and do a bit of clarification, since I know that someone in the comment section is going to bring it up. For those who don't know, Prophecy Games is a studio that was founded in 2019 and was under Hi-Res Studios for a time before going independent in 2020. Since then, they've made quite a few games, from Tribes 3 Ascend to the now delisted Star Siege Deadzone, which would end up being the game we're covering today, but reimagined as a roguelite instead of an extraction shooter. The previous games I mentioned have since been abandoned by the developers, with Star Siege being updated over 22 months ago and Tribes 3 being updated 14 months ago. No news or announcements were given to each title, they just simply put them on life support and left them to bleed. I find it so funny how these guys have the balls to continue charging and advertising Tribes 3 on their site, considering that they've done fuck all to get people's attention or wanted them to come back. It's a pretty big deal and was for me and many others when Deadzone Rogue originally went early access back in April this year, being skeptical and assuming that these guys will most likely abandon this game too. But fast forward almost 4 months later and it's now 1.0, with new content, frequent updates, and a feedback page in game that lets you give personal feedback that goes straight to the devs without needing to hop into their Discord. So they're heading towards the right direction and have clearly learned from their past mistakes. Then again, there's a supposed Zone 4 coming in 2026, so whether or not they'll pull the 343 Industries or actually drop that zone is anyone's guess. Whether you like the studio or not, Prophecy Games have designed this game to be a single player game with optional co-op, meaning no online connection is required and servers work through peer-to-peer rather than dedicated, so there's no way the servers or the game can physically get shut down unless they delist the game on Steam. Just wanted to give some initial thoughts on this to clarify that situation. With that being said, is Deadzone Rogue worth buying? Let's get into it, shall we? Oh, and one last thing to mention, I didn't end up playing the game in co-op, so this will be reviewed from an entirely solo experience. Deadzone Rogue takes place in a derelict ship and starts off by waking up with amnesia, having no idea how you got to the ship or what's going on. As you travel through the game's 3 zones, you'll be figuring out what's going on in the ship through logs, conversations to yourself, and this voice that'll be taunting and talking to you. And look, the story isn't anything to be excited about, but it at least gives you a sense of direction. You know, a way of figuring out what's going on without just simply going through the zones and shooting bad guys. The writing is terrible, and people have mentioned AI for the voices or something in the Steam reviews, but I'm not sure if it's true or not. The mission design of Deadzone Rogue is both straightforward but also fascinating at the same time. The game is divided into 3 zones, with the first zone being an introductory area of sorts, the second being the middle of the pack, and the third being the hardest and also the newest, spawning some cool enemies and interesting interior design thanks to the alien matter that's harvesting on the ship. There's 3 story missions, which will be the bulk and meat so to speak for the majority of the game, while the specialty and challenge missions act as side missions. Missions with modifiers and unique weapons that force you to play a certain way. Select the level you want, head through the elevator, and go through an X amount of floors within the zone, killing enemies and earning weapons, gear, and items. The areas and enemies are also procedurally generated, but can feel samey at times once you've played that area enough. Deadzone Rogue has you go through all kinds of places, from space bars to big open spaces, cool interior rooms, and even platforming sections. It's nice to have variety instead of just going through the same type of room over and over again. What's fascinating about this is that usually in a lot of roguelikes, you typically go from one area to the next, so you'll get different biomes, enemies, and locations all bunched up into a run. But in Deadzone, it's just the one area for say 20 or 30 areas or arenas, and then you move on to the next. Which I wonder if this was some sort of game design decision to make level design a lot quicker and easier, or they just didn't feel like doing the standard method like most games. These missions can also give you skins, currency, and gear that can be carried over to future runs, like these dual-wield SMGs here, which happen to be my favorite guns of the entire game. Missions have 5 difficulties, with Adventure, Normal, and Hard being unlocked immediately, and Expert and Nightmare being locked until you complete the difficulty prior. You're able to complete these on any difficulty you wish to unlock said items, with higher items only pushing for better looking skins of what's available there within that mission, if that's your cup of tea. The majority of my playtime was on hard difficulty, and I personally didn't find it too difficult, though I had to cut it down to normal for a time because I was feeling underpowered as a result of my current upgrades at the time. My favorite missions though will have to be the Horde or Endless style missions, where you have to either hold out an area for as long as you can or go room by room like you normally would, just clearing baddies until you die. These missions in particular are where the game becomes peak and have their own way of difficulty scaling called escalating. I also really love the skins that they give you here. This game nails the zero to hero gameplay loop perfectly, starting off with this crappy pistol that has some cool inspect animations, might I add, and gradually getting stronger as you obtain what you need to create your build. You'll start with your augment, which is usually your build defining item, and there's 3 base stats to choose from crits to elemental and weak points. These get defined into categories and actually function differently from one another. So, for example, Ammo Crit gives you a larger magazine size and gives you bonus crit chance and damage per missing bullet, whereas Hipfire Crit gives you 100% crit damage, movement speed, and 20% less spread. Once you've picked your augment, you'll start to obtain items and perks, items granting passive bonuses and perks giving you huge bonuses, such as elements, armor, shields, and bot companions, all which can be upgraded with additional or secondary perks, with a maximum of 3 for each perk. Weapons come in different rarities, elements, and affixes, with each rarity increasing the amount of affixes you can have on it and armor functioning pretty much the same way. Every few areas, you'll come across a safe area that heals you and offers a fabricator, which can be used to upgrade and purchase new gear. It's always good to upgrade your armor since it's dirt cheap and you'll usually have more than enough scrap to do so, and weapons can also be upgraded to do more damage and have more affixes if the weapon allows for it. It also depends on where you're at within the run, as you won't be able to upgrade the rarity immediately until you progress later into the zone, which gives the game a good sense of balance. In zones 2 and 3, more options open up, with zone 2 introducing these superior items that are essentially ridiculous and strong items, and zone 3 introducing synergies, which function like set bonuses from a Diablo game. It reminds me of spiritual links from Gunfire Reborn, where you simply grab a few items and a perk if necessary and be given that bonus. This game can make you extremely broken if you play your cards right and pick the right perks and items, like this one run I had in zone 3 where I specced out a cryo build, which allowed for tons of procs and freezing enemies for days, making them useless. Combine that with proc damage, proc chance, and smart rockets, which lets me fire my grenades every few seconds as rockets, and nothing stood a chance. Upon completing a run, you'll gain tech and components, which are used to upgrade your tech masteries, which are this game's permanent upgrades. It was a bit confusing at first because I'm usually used to seeing 1 or 2 currencies for this sort of stuff, but you have to earn these components, which is pretty much easier said than done since you just gotta kill things to get these to drop, as well as killing bosses, which allows you to pick from 1 of 3 choices. Most of these components are RNG drops, so everyone's going to have a different path for what they're going to upgrade, and more components in tech drop by playing on higher difficulties. If you want to max these out as soon as possible, Expert is the way to go. Just don't say I didn't warn you when I tell you that it's hard if your tech upgrades aren't up to snuff. Superior items can also be upgraded with their own components, obtained from either zones 2 or 3. It kinda sucked when I learned that within 10 hours of gameplay, I'd already maxed these out, and I wish the grind was a bit longer, even just a few extra hours. I never use this feature myself, but Deadzone does have a checkpoint system, or a dad mode as someone put it in a YouTube comment, which I think is a great thing to have for those that may not be able to complete a run in time. I've heard that it's bugged on adventure mode and it may or may not be fixed by the time this video goes live, but something worth noting. Deadzone has over 30 weapons to choose from, ranging from assault rifles to submachine guns, snipers, and shotguns, alongside unique or exotic weapons like the aforementioned dual-wield subs and the plasma cycler, a weapon that deals more proc damage but loses its fire rate whenever you miss a shot. I'm very 50-50 on the gunplay, because on one hand it feels tight and solid in terms of how it feels to shoot and how well it registers, but on the other hand, it's giving me that indie jank where it's missing something. Visual recoil perhaps? It may not help that I've reduced my camera movement intensity down to 0 since I'm not the biggest fan of camera shake and view bob in games, but it feels like it's missing that oomph. Even though RoboQuest doesn't have these sorts of settings, it was able to nail it down for me thanks to the visual feedback you got and the way robots would just explode and die. But it just feels weak here. It's not an issue most of the time though, Just look at this example of a horde run I had where it's just constant freeze effects and heaps of enemies spawning in at once. I want more of this. Maybe it's because of the pacing and how they place enemies, though this can probably be replicated on higher difficulties. Enemy variety is solid, with plenty of fodder, melee, and ranged enemies to fight. They actually have different enemies for each zone, so you won't be fighting the same guys over and over unless you're, playing the same zone over and over again. You've got robots, guys with shields, flying drones, dudes with rockets, infested guys with guns, and spiders, just to name a few. None of the enemies felt broken, buggy, or ridiculous to fight. One thing that I think Prophecy games should be proud of is how accessible Deadzone Rogue is. Thanks to the game's 5 difficulties, it's easy to pick up and learn, but hard to master if you want to push yourself for those higher difficulties. It also helps that the zone and level design they went for is super good, where runs can last anywhere from half an hour to an hour max, sometimes even less if you have some ridiculous build, and I'd easily recommend this to someone as their first roguelite or roguelike game. Not to mention build and theory crafting is so easy to do here as well. Comparing it to Gunfire Reborn, Gunfire is a lot harder game to get into because of the different characters, dozens of scrolls you have to learn, elemental fusions you need to figure out, step bonuses, and plenty of random events and challenges to do. Deadzone's got some good accessibility settings, such as adjusting the damage number and map sizes, as well as basic crosshair settings, allowing you to configure and make your own crosshair. Performance-wise, this game runs beautifully, considering that it's made in Unreal Engine 5. Yeah, Unreal Engine 5. Granted, I did change some things such as Luma being turned off to gain additional FPS, but I've been on all high settings with a capped frame rate to my refresh rate and I've had 0 issues. No game crashes, freezes, or stutters. Upscaling and frame generation options are available here, and in terms of dropping certain settings, I recommend lumen off, reflections off, and shadow quality to at least medium, as the game will look worse with it off. Global illumination is something worth looking at as well, though that can also make the game look a bit dull, since a ton of the game relies on lighting due to how dark it is. I don't really have anything I can criticize Prophecy games for, aside from what I mentioned previously in other sections, because they've genuinely made a great game. So instead, I have some suggestions. Adding a stats tab / page. I'm kind of surprised to not see this at launch, given that this is a game that thrives on min-maxing and experimenting with different elements and weapons, so I'd like to see a page where it shows you everything, from your critical hit chance to damage, proc chance and damage, bot companion damage, total elemental damage, etc, etc. Just something to see the actual values that we have so we can indicate whether to continuously focus on that or try to get something else. This would be huge for the stat nerds, but great for everyone in general. As of right now, you have to calculate everything yourself, which is a pain in the ass. A full run or mission. What do I mean by this? Combining all 3 story missions into one huge run, alongside adding superior items and synergies, since they're only available in their respective zones. Perhaps adding the option to include those in the previous zones, or having high difficulties enable those by default would be a good way to go about it too. Random events and secrets. I spent the first 2 hours running around maps to see if there's any secrets or events worth finding and playing, to learn that there's none of that at all. Given how repetitive this game can get, I think adding these would spice things up and make the runs more enjoyable. Some ideas I have include destroying beacons, respawn pods, or defending an area for a period of time. Secrets can be little things like finding more logs, obtaining an additional item or perk, or even obtaining a decked out legendary weapon early on. Scrapping gear. I hate both swapping gear with new gear I found on the floor and seeing gear stay there with no use other than pinging it for your teammates. I'd love to see an option to scrap gear to help with scrap acquisition. These can also just be fixed values depending on its level and rarity, and I think it's very easy to implement too. All in all, Deadzone Rogue is an excellent FPS roguelite that's got the potential to be up there with the greats like RoboQuest and Gunfire Reborn, and worth picking up at either its current discount launch price or full price by the time it goes away. It's a bit repetitive, sure, and it's got a bit of jank, but when you put those aside, all you have here is a game that's accessible, easy to pick up and build / theory craft, and plenty of hours of gameplay that can easily be amplified if you grab a few friends. It can serve as a great introduction to roguelikes as well. And even with the game being renamed 4 times and all this abandoned talk, Prophecy Games have shown that they want to make up for their losses and make a damn good game. Who knows? I may be eating my words in the next few months and Zone 4 will just never drop while they move on to their next title. I got the time I wanted out of it, and the only thing I can see myself doing now after 17 hours of gameplay is completing the same missions on higher difficulties and going for those achievements. But another FPS roguelite just dropped, so I may just go and play that. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. If I missed anything, comment down below. I'll have more coming to you soon. Peace.